So like Bob said in his video,
for some reason, no D20 fantasy TTRPG that I've ever seen actually uses this idea in their rulebook or adventure modules as the default approach to checks and saving throws. They always write in some specific stat which inevitably constricts the imagination of the GM and players about how that challenge can be faced.
this is something that I actively wanted to develop to encourage more interesting roleplay. And after testing this, it feels really, really good. And it allows for some very interesting and seamless cooperative world building between the players and also the Oracle. So in the most recent Bob video that let's see, it came out a day ago, one house rule for easy roleplay in D&D. Bob said some very interesting things in this video that I was like,
Instead of assigning a specific stat or skill to a check, you leave it blank and allow the player facing the challenge to use any stat for the role as long as they can provide a reasonable description of how their character uses the chosen attribute.
Somebody else is thinking about the same thing that I'm thinking about, albeit, used kind of universally for like other tabletop role-playing games. So as we are going through the character sheet, we have this large chunk right here that has anatomy, exploration, investigation, divinity, survival, influence, physicality, stealth, and artistry. And you can see that there are subcategories between each one of those. These will be your expertise or your skills, and these will be the primary method that will be used for exploring the world and determining the outcome of specific situations. So, for expertise, you will have the opportunity to apply your adventuring experiences in the form of expertise. Expertise is the primary method of calculating how you interact with the majority of the world. These expertise, or traditionally known as skills, are broken down into 9 categories. These categories are further expanded upon with subcategories as a way to encourage role-play opportunities. The modifiers can be placed anywhere the player would like in a manner that makes sense for the character. The highest modifier that a player can receive in one expertise is +5. You will have the opportunity to gain expertise while adventuring by exchanging boons for an expertise increase. Lastly, you can gain boons by successfully completing expertise checks. For every 5 successes in one specific expertise, you will gain 1 boon. So that's what these diamonds are above each of the expertise. Whenever you complete a successful anatomy expertise check, you would fill that diamond in. And whenever you get to 5, then you gain 1 boon, which will allow you to exchange it for an expertise increase as you progress through the game. Expertise checks. Additionally, expertise checks are primarily requested by the player. When a player would like to do an expertise check, they may use any applicable expertise to perform this check. When you attempt an expertise check, it will require you to expend 1 essence unless a mastery option or other option requires an expertise check. For example, one player may request a survival expertise check to investigate an area, explaining that they have spent time surviving in a similar area, whereas another player may request an investigation expertise check on the same area, citing a previous experience that would give the player some insight during the investigation. While performing an expertise check, there is no wrong way to request this. This allows players to expand on their background in real time, elaborating on this as much as they would like. When a player requests an expertise check, they must roll a d20 and add the modifier for the expertise they desire. If a player does not have a modifier in the expertise they are requesting to use, they must roll a flat d20 to perform the check. So there's different expertise types. Below is a list of all expertise that all players will have access to, along with a brief explanation for each. Additionally, the subcategories will be outlined as well. These subcategories are provided as a means to expand on the player's background. Below are examples of each subcategory and do not provide a full in-depth explanation for each. These are merely examples of what each subcategory could entail. So anatomy is expertise explains how much experience a player has regarding the physical anatomy of creatures and know how to treat wounds or other ailments. Then you also have the subcategories, which is knowledge, which is learned, or intuition, which is instinct. As you can see, there's different subcategories for each one, and you would put your plus modifier here. Let's say that you have a +3 knowledge in anatomy here. And then as you adventure, you think that it makes more sense that you gain intuition, which would be instinct, because of your knowledge and because of you being around specific creatures that you're trying to do anatomy expertise check. You can do a +2 in this, and whenever you do an anatomy expertise check, you add the two values together. So this would be +5. These subcategories are merely specifically for expanding on roleplay opportunities. That's exactly what they're here for, and that's how they should be used. Exploration. This expertise explains how much experience a player has about the physical world around them. You have urban, which is cities or towns, and then rural, which is woods or caves. Investigation. This expertise explains how much experience a player has when examining specific situations. So knowledge is something that has been learned or taught. Intuition is instinct. Divinity. This expertise explains how much experience a player has with determining the religious significance of items, events, etc. Knowledge is learned, and then intuition is instinct. For survival, this expertise explains how much experience a player has with surviving in the explored worlds. Endurance is patience, and resolve is determination. So this one's just a little bit different. You know, a lot of them are knowledge and intuition, but for survival, you know, you have your endurance, which is possibly a situation to where you have lived in this and survived in this environment before, whereas resolve is just your pure grit and determination to try to make that happen. Influence. This expertise explains how much experience a player has with conversing with other individuals. You have intimidation, which is to frighten someone, and then persuasion, which is to convince someone. Physicality. This expertise explains how much experience a player has with approaching physical situations. You have nimbleness, which means that you're more agile, and athletics, which means that you're more strong. Stealth. This expertise explains how much experience a player has with sneaking around and doing stealthy type things. Knowledge is something that is learned, so maybe that you were part of a thieves guild or something like that, whereas intuition, you're able to read the situation. Artistry. This expertise explains how much experience a player has with performing artistic feats. Knowledge is something that was learned, so maybe you took a pottery class, whereas intuition is instinct, and maybe you can mold the pottery because you can see it in your head very well. Expertise in combat. So while engaging in combat, you will have the ability to perform expertise checks. These checks will require an essence to perform, but may provide very valuable information about the enemies you are encountering. If a mastery option requires you to perform an expertise to complete, there will only be essence used for the mastery option, but not required for the associated expertise check. So right here, there is a mastery option that you could gain called Studied Combatant, and it's making a successful expertise check against a creature gives you favor on attack rolls against this creature type for the remainder of combat. This does not carry over from one encounter to another. So you could use a mastery option, Studied Combatant, to, if you're fighting like a group of kobolds or a group of goblins or whatever, you can study them using whatever expertise that you would like to try to gain some type of advantage. And this kind of goes into determining weaknesses, determining things that would cause more harm to these creatures, seeing what they're vulnerable to, things like that. You can use expertise or mastery options that have expertise kind of rolled into them that give you additional benefits and able to gain advantage on the creatures that you're fighting against. Expertise checks and exploration. So as outlined previously, expertise checks are primarily requested by the players. While exploring various locations, players have the opportunity to perform expertise checks as an effort to gain more information about the area they are exploring. When an expertise check is performed, the Oracle has the option to perform an exploration check against the player to determine what information is gathered by the player, or allow the players an opportunity to collaboratively build the exploration area out. When a player requests an expertise check, they must explain what they are checking for and what expertise they are using for the check. Additionally, a player can make an observation check by using an expertise check and stating that they are inquiring about the general area around them. Expertise character progression. And this kind of goes into what we were talking about just a little bit earlier with the diamonds on top of the character sheet. In an effort to expand your expertise over time, you must make successful expertise checks. Once you gain a success in an expertise check, you will gain 1 success or 1 pip in that specific expertise check. After you gain 5 successes in a specific expertise, you will gain 1 boon. You can exchange 5 boons for a +1 increase in any expertise that you would like, as long as it isn't at +5 already. this was kind of a backbone thing that I wanted to build out in this tabletop role-playing game, where players are always asking for insight checks whenever they're playing D&D. And then whenever they come into a certain situation, then it's normally the DM is like, okay, I need you to do this kind of check. I need you to do this kind of skill check. I need you to do this kind of check for this specific situation or whatever. And it's normally hard locked into something. And if it's not a traditional adventure, if you're homebrewing, then you either have to come up with like what makes the most sense in the moment, you know, especially whenever the players start deviating into other areas that you're not expecting them to. Or you have to talk with your players to kind of come up with what would make the most sense as a skill check or, you know, any other type of check within D&D. I didn't like that much. You know, I thought that it could be expanded on a little bit better, and it could be something that would be a little bit more interesting to where players are able to pick whatever expertise that they want to in specific situations and explain how or why they may know this information. And it allows for very interesting gateways into characters' backgrounds, and allows characters and players to develop their backgrounds in real time. If you want to do an expertise check in a wooded area, you can use a survival expertise check in that area because maybe you've lived in that area. Maybe you were abandoned in that area as a child and you grew up in an area similar to that. Or you can use something like investigation. So you have keen investigation, and it allows you to kind of, even though you may not be as familiar with the area as other areas in the world, you may be able to pick up certain specific inconsistencies within the environment. Whereas someone may decide to do an exploration check there in a rural area, and it could be similar to the survival check where they've grown up in the area, or it could be something where they've read about the area, they've studied the area, and they're able to determine from there. Additionally, you could use physicality, you could use stealth, you could use artistry, whatever makes the most sense for your character. And this plays itself into the dynamic difficulty, which I'll go into in a future video, to where a player's explanation of what they are trying to do with their expertise changes the difficulty of the situation in real time on the fly. If they say that they're doing an exploration check in this wooded area and they're doing a rule check, and let's say that they grew up in an area similar to this and they give a really good explanation, it may make it easier for them to complete the task. Whereas if they decided that they wanted to use something like influence, and let's say that they use influence to try to use their persuasion of speaking with the forest, but they don't have any mastery options and they have no way of speaking with any type of creatures in that area to gain that, then it would make it more difficult for them to actually be able to complete the task successfully. Giving it a player-facing side that allows players to actually pick the expertise checks that they want to perform when they're exploring specific areas allows for a lot more freedom, and it allows for a lot more player engagement, because the alacrity system works very much like the initiative system in Shadow Dark does, where you're kind of locked in to a specific, you know, initiative or alacrity order as you explore. And because you're locked into this order, you have 3 things that you can do with the 3 essence. So you don't want to waste any of that stuff. So it allows for exploration to be a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more faster. Even though you're going player by player by player, they know that they have access to X amount of essence. They know that if they don't use that, then they lose that. So why not do additional expertise checks? Why not do a little bit additional movement, maybe scout ahead? Why not try to figure out what's going on in a specific situation? But be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on an open expertise system where you can kind of freeform go around, use whatever skill you want to, and in any type of way that you want to use it, in an effort to try to not only gain boons so that you gain your character progression, but also use the skills that you've acquired in very unique and interesting ways, and also in the process expanding on your player's background. Is this something that you think is very interesting, or do you think that this is very convoluted and something that isn't going to be able to be pulled off successfully. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Also, be sure to check that description for links to Facebook, Discord, and Twitter. Those are the places to contact me. And I'll also have a link in the description to the current version of the master document if you want to go check the system out and read how everything works together up to the point that I've written it so far. Please be sure to do that. If you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. If you've already subscribed to the channel, then consider hitting that join button to become one of the 256 crew members. Lastly, I will be streaming on Thursdays and also on Sundays, so if you have any information about the tabletop role-playing game, please feel free to swing by over there, and I would be more than happy to have some open discussions about how the game works and the particular balance and mentality going into designing the game. Thanks for watching, guys.